Hope is the attitude that has to carry us all through life. We either live a life of hope as Christians in what Christ has promised, or we live lives that are hopeless, that is, lives of despair without the divine assistance. Our readings today remind us of what our hope is built upon. It's built upon the power of Jesus Christ and the compassion that he had for those with whom he came in contact with. There are innumerable examples in the gospel where Jesus heals the blind, gives power to the lame to walk, and his greatest miracles of raising some from the dead. And so it is today that this Jairus has the faith to approach Jesus to come and cure his daughter. And when they get there, the people say, well, don't bother the teacher anymore, she's dead. And Jesus says, she is not dead, she is sleeping. And they ridiculed him. Another translation says they laughed at him. Can you imagine laughing at the Son of God? Jesus puts them all out, except Peter, James, and John, and the parents of the child, because they have faith in him, whereas these others who laughed at him do not. And he takes her by the hand and tells her to get up, and this child of 12 is restored to her mother and father. And so the hope that Jairus had in trusting in the power of Jesus is fulfilled. Despite all of our scientific advances, we are going to die. And most likely, Jesus is not going to be there at that moment to raise us from the dead. But our hope lies in what Jesus himself has done. Jesus who died, Jesus who was buried, and then Jesus who was raised by the power of the Father to new life. Therefore, Christ gives his faithful disciples hope. God did not create us to live in this world forever. It is but part of our existence, of our experience of being made in the image and likeness of God. Rather, God created us to live a life that is ultimately quite different from this present life, that is, the glorified life in the kingdom to come. Christ clearly tells us that he is the way, he is the truth, and he is the life. And he wishes to share that life with us, which he already does through the sacramental life of the Church. The Church has been the guardian of the Holy Eucharist from the Last Supper forward, because, as Vatican II teaches, the Eucharist is central and fundamental to all other activity in the Church. And thus, when Jesus instituted the Holy Eucharist, he instituted the sacred priesthood, which is essential to the celebration of the Eucharist, because the priest, by the power of God, stands in the place of Christ as an alter Christus, Christ who works through the priest, Christ who speaks through the priest, Christ who continually, through the priest, reenacts this Holy Eucharist, which is offered daily on our altars, to give us strength, to give us hope. And without the sacred priesthood, there would be no Eucharist. And as the early church fathers taught us, if there is no Eucharist, there is no church, since the Eucharist is fundamental to the existence of the Church since it is, as I said, the reenactment of Christ on Calvary. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, it is essential for us to promote vocations to the sacred priesthood, to support our seminarians, and to support those priests who daily stand at their altars, reenacting the sacrifice of Calvary, providing us with the heavenly sacrament of the body and blood of Christ. In the institution of the sacred priesthood, Jesus thus assured his followers that the Eucharist would be offered in his church until he comes again in glory, offered by the men he had chosen for this task. Let us remember that all priests are sinful human beings like everyone else. Priests are in need of redemption. Priests are in need of forgiveness. Priests are in need of the special graces that come from the Eucharist. Nevertheless, the activity of Christ takes place through them, and they have a special and sacred office in the life of the Church to perform for the well-being of others. Our faith tells us that death is merely a falling asleep in Christ, and Christ is in our midst as we gather today to offer this most holy Eucharist, Eucharistia, a word which means thanksgiving, to give thanks to God first for the gift of salvation, and then for all the good things that God provides for us. We gather in prayer, we hear his word as he speaks, and we share in his body and blood which he instituted at the Last Supper. Let us, in this sacrament, reach out and touch him, and be open to whatever grace he offers us and whatever cross he privileges us to share in. Let us hear him say clearly, as he has said, "Do not be afraid, just have faith. Have faith in me and have faith in the works that I do." Let us believe in what Christ himself has promised in the Bread of Life discourse. Whoever eats this bread shall never die, but shall live forever. Let us live our lives in light of this promise, being faithful always to what the risen Lord has imparted to us until he calls us to eternal glory.